I guess there's a few things that I should probably clarify because yesterday I got in a hurry. It's not really the easiest story to tell, and the fact that it happened 40 plus years ago, trying to remember it's not all that easy. I I don't know. I've kind of have a selective amnesia. I don't really remember my childhood much, so I do apologize. But I guess I should describe my mother a little bit better. She ran away at 14 years old, I believe. Um, at least that's what she told me. And she didn't really say exactly why she ran away. She was a pathological liar. She lied a lot. So nobody really knows the real story of anything. Um, she's about, a short woman, about 5'2", I believe, 5 foot, something around there. Probably 5'2", 5'1". Skinny, loved to party. I remember that. She's real pretty when she was younger, but the drugs got a hold of her pretty quickly. So, as many times she got punched in the mouth, she's broken just about every bone. She's broken her jaw several times. I remember growing up. I say growing up. I remember as a child, her having her jaw wired shut and have to drink through a straw. That was from her boyfriends and from her second husband, at least. I don't know about the first. I wasn't around. But she ran away with my father, who's 3 years older than her. So he was probably around 17 when he ran away. And according to what he told me, he ran away because he didn't want her running by herself. I assumed they were in a relationship. I don't know. Knowing him, you never know. But he was an alcoholic also. From what stories I've heard, he tried running her over with his truck when she was pregnant with me. He was a violent person. A lot of people say that he was. He even admits that when he was younger, he got into fights, a lot of fights. His face is completely scarred up from them. But as I'd said before, he left whenever I was born. He was a My mother was more of a country girl, wannabe hippie, but not too hippie-ish. Um, Her favorite word to say was wicked, but I don't know. She was a very, she acted like she loved me, like her was her favorite, but I say acted when I was around. She did, sort of. Um, but when I don't know, after my father left and she got with my stepdad, he, like I said before, he was out there. Um, I remember he could play guitar. He'd try teaching my sister how to play the guitar, um, but didn't try teaching me. Um, he was a singer. I don't know if he ever sang in any band or anything. He sings in prison band right now. From what I say that 20 years ago when I heard about it, he was in a prison band. Um, but I remember when I was about 4 years old. I'm going to backtrack a little bit because this was a memory that popped up. When I was about 4 years old, he had we were living in Shakota or Muskogee, one or the other. But I remember buckling over the chair and my stomach was hurting awful. And they took me to the hospital and they couldn't figure out what was wrong, but I came real weak. Um, I just remember the visions of uh, when they brought food, it looked like it was mildewed for some reason in my head. I remember it just making me nauseous. I remember being, I'm this 4-year-old little boy. I remember being pushed into this room, and the nurse is trying to give me a shot. But from what I'm told, I was actually on my deathbed. They thought I was dying. Not thought that they said I was dying. They couldn't figure out why. I was in the hospital for about 2 weeks, and then suddenly I woke up one day and I was perfectly fine. I can't remember it, so I can't tell you what happened. Nobody knows what it was, but I don't know. Anyway, we ended up moving into Shakota, and I had the memories, but it wasn't until I moved back into Shakota years and years later that I actually saw the houses and stuff that I lived in. We lived in a motel at one time, and I remember uh, falling down on the sidewalk and skinning my knees. I don't even know why I'm telling these stuff. It's probably not that important, but I just remember always seeing pain. I mean, I was always sad. I was never happy. I was always waiting to get in trouble. I mean, I remember when we were living in these clapboard houses in Shakota. I seen them. They were tiny. I didn't realize how tiny they were, but I had to go pee really bad. I was outside, and I took off running to go inside the house, and I didn't end up making it. And I was about 4.5 years old, something like that. Well, my baby brother was a baby, so I was about 4.5, 5 years old. Um, because I remember accidentally dropping a penny down his mouth. He was laying down, and I was just kind of going like that, and it dropped and went into his mouth, and he almost choked to death. But I remember my stepdad getting onto me and busting my ass because I peed my pants and then put me in a diaper. I was always getting in trouble for something by him. He didn't like me at all. Uh, but anyway, I fast forward to all that other stuff. The only time I remember anything good happening was when I would go to my granny and grandpa's house. They lived on a farm that was nobody lived around them really, at least for miles at that time. We had chickens, geese, lots of chickens and geese and hogs and cattle, and I learned how to work there. But when I was, pardon me if I keep jumping around. I remember it was just a thought that I remembered when we lived in the house in Kansas that I spoke out yesterday that was filled with snakes. I remember my mother, we'd go driving down the dirt road and we'd see poke salad, wild poke salad, and she'd stop to grab it. God, I hated that stuff. It was nasty. Um, but we lived off food that we found. I don't remember having a lot of groceries ever. Uh, ate a lot of peanut butter. Didn't always have bread, but when we were in Oklahoma, we got Indian commodities, which was, you wouldn't think that being poor I'd be all that picky, but I was. I hated all of it, but besides the cheese. But let's fast forward again. My stepfather gets arrested. He ends up getting sentenced to 25 years per state line that he crossed, from what I'm told. But he was eligible for parole way earlier than that. Hell, he could be out right now. I wouldn't know. Um, but the irony of it is he didn't go to prison for anything that had to do with me, my sister, or my mother. It was because he kidnapped that woman. Um, so he never had to serve any time over it, never got in trouble over it, never been arrested over it. I mean, I'm sure he's gotten arrested for domestic or some stuff. I can't remember. I remember seeing him in jail once when we lived in Texas, I believe. But anyway, so my now my mother is no longer with him, and she dates random people. I mean, all kinds of different people. There was a biker dude once. There was a guy by the name of Carol Partain. I think I remember the name just because it was so odd. I remember the vehicle he drove, and he had braces on his legs. I thought it was weird how my mother would be in a relationship with him. But them two weren't that bad because they didn't ever do anything bad that I remember to us. But it's when she got with Ronnie Lovell, a redheaded man. Wasn't fat, but he was stocky. At least from what I remember. Had a vicious temper. I remember one night, it was winter time. It was snow on the ground and everything, and he would, one night he got really drunk. My mother was really drunk, and she took off with us kids running out. We lived kind of in the country, and I remember running through the woods, running from him because he had a gun and he was chasing us. I mean, it was cold. It was strange because I don't remember ever being scared. And all of these times that all this happened, it was like I was just outside my body. My brain just went somewhere else to thinking tactically, even at that age. I don't mean tactically like today's, my law enforcement background tactically. I mean like uh, logically. What do I do here? What do I do there? I just didn't. I was never emotionally involved in any of it. And of course, they sober up and get back together. Another night, I remember she was laying on the road, waiting for somebody to run her over. And she eventually got up, and then she started, I guess he started looking for her, and we went from door to door to neighbors' houses trying to get them to call the cops. But there was only one cop in that area, that town. His name was Gene Basta. Don't know why I remember his name. But I just remember nights, so many times of having to get my mother undressed and help her into bed, or take her off the toilet when she fell asleep on the toilet while she was drunk. I was about 7 years old. One night they were having a party. And after everybody left, of course, they ended up getting into a fight. And I was about 7, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I My mother was on the chair right by the door, and when she was there, he got up and he went over there and started walking towards her pretty briskly, swiftly, or brisk, whatever you you're the author. I don't know, but pretty quickly. And I jumped in front of him and her, between them. And I said, "You're not going to touch my mama." That's when he punched me in the face. But I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just wasn't going to let him do anything. You'd think that'd be a good enough reason for my mother to leave him, but she did not leave him that night. We stayed there a while. They had this friend. His name was Joe. I remember he was a strange character. I think he was a Vietnam vet. I remember one time he picked me up in town, and something was about him that I thought he was going to pass the house. And so I tried to jump out of the truck, and he grabs me, catches me by my hair while I'm falling out the truck, and he pulls me back in. but he ended up taking me to my house. And I can't remember if it was the same day or not, but I mean, he was nuts. One day he pulled up to the house, and I was standing right in front of the garage door, and it was kind of on a hill, and he pulled up and stopped right in front of me, pretty close, gets out and puts a gun to my head. I'm 7 years old, and I don't know why he did it. I don't know what was his issue. I mean, he could have been looking for Ronnie. I don't know. Um, but then were the characters my mother hung out with. They were all a little bit strange. The only good times is when I was, outside, because that's the way it was. Is as soon as morning came, we went outside. They locked the door. We weren't allowed inside the house. We'd find things to do. Well, there was a burn pit that was close to the house. It was on this kind of ledge or this drop off. It was this huge hill. And I remember we built this um, go kart. I mean, it didn't have an engine or anything. So what we'd do is we'd get on the very top and we'd jump in and we would ride it down the hill. I remember jumping on it and trying to jump over the burn pit and stuff. I mean, I was a bit nuts. I mean, I was never scared to get hurt. It just didn't bother me. I was never good with fear. When I got scared of something, it just meant that I needed to face it. I just felt this this drive that I have to face it. I can't run. I can't be scared. I mean, I was so surrounded by emotions all the time. I mean, people being upset, I couldn't depend on anybody. They say, I say they, I guess I say, uh, people's first taste of faith is with their parents. And no, I've said this to several Christians, and they're like, yeah. They're the ones who take them to church. No, I don't mean church. I don't mean God. I don't mean spirituality. I mean faith in anything. You have faith in your parents because you have faith that your parents are going to feed you. You have faith that your parents are going to clothe you. They're going to bathe you. They're going to protect you. I didn't have any of that. More often than not, me and my sister were feeding ourselves. We were. There was no such thing as protection because my mother, she didn't protect us. She was apathetic. That's why I call this chapter of my life Evil and Apathy, because I know firsthand apathy is so much worse than evil. Evil can be stopped. With a good person, evil can be stopped. But apathy allows the cancer to grow. It allows people to get hurt. That's why I say I never felt love, because I was never protected. Never, my sister wasn't. Nobody would ever hurt my baby brother because that was my stepdad's son. But we eventually did get away. We moved um, to Texas, where my stepdad's mother and his stepfather lived, in Arlington, Texas, Fort Worth, Arlington, Texas. Um, my mother got a job cleaning apartment buildings. We lived in the projects, um, but she went around cleaning houses, which was perfect for her. I mean, she was always a hard worker. I mean, I can say we never had a dirty house growing up. It was always spotless. But when you find out your mom also did meth, I mean, there's probably a reason. But I don't think she was a meth junkie, but she would do it. She was more into alcohol. She'd smoke pot. I remember that. But alcohol was her thing. She loved to get drunk. I remember trying out for the football team. My next door neighbor was a coach, and I he wanted me to join the football team in the Pee Wee League. So I joined, and I remember, drinking uh, raw eggs, stuff like that, trying to get big and stuff because I was always a skinny kid. I looked like this cancer patient. I mean, in fact, when I talked to my Aunt Debbie later in life, um, her sons are twins and they're my age. We're only like a month apart. But she had told me that she really thought I was going to die because I always looked sick. And I was sick all the time. But I tried out for I say you tried out. I didn't try out. I just joined the football team, the neighborhood football team. Um, there's a league. I don't know what it was called, Pee Wee or something like that. But I was, I remember the position I played. Never mind, I don't remember the position. Um, but my job it was on defense. And he just pointed me to the guy that he said, "See that guy right there? What I want you to do is make sure he gets on the ground." And I had a temper. Um, I wasn't scared of anything. I was not strong enough to not be scared of anything, but and wasn't big enough. I was always a lot smaller than everybody else. But I remember running and getting him. I wasn't afraid to try everything, and I put him in a hold, neck lock, and started shaking him around and threw him on the ground. And of course, I got kicked off the team because apparently I was too violent. But I was just doing what I was told. He told me to make sure he gets on the ground, and I always had that problem when I was younger. When somebody tell me something, I would take everything literally. I didn't know how to understand or recognize communication. Um, and so I got in trouble a lot. Uh, that's probably why my mother's boyfriends and or her husbands never liked me. It's because I was difficult. I mean, I wasn't going out, causing problems, but I was a difficult child. I mean, you couldn't conversate with me and get me to understand what you're saying. You had to say things in a particular way. And so people thought that I was, you know, learning deficient, we'll say. They thought there was something wrong with me because, again, communication is, well, I say again, I've never said it to y'all, but communication is the, uh, the first sign of intelligence. I mean, I know a lot of politicians that are horrible and are horribly unintelligent, but they know how to speak. And so we assume they're intelligent. And then there's some that look at George Bush, you know, the junior, George W. Uh, Super intelligent guy. I mean, he's an Ivy League graduate. I don't like him. I won't say but he's very corrupt. Um, and I'm a conservative, but he's very corrupt. But people think he's an idiot because of the way he sounded when he spoke. Uh, Look at Donald Trump. I love Donald Trump, but the way he speaks makes these higher end people not like him, thinking he's an idiot because of the way he speaks. No, he's speaking the way we understand. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. So we live in Texas. Um, we During the day, uh, I had free reign of the city. I mean, I remember riding my bicycle across the city. I mean, nobody ever said anything, but I got bullied a lot. Um, Mostly it was funny. I lived in a black neighborhood. Most of my neighbors were all black. Most of the kids were black. But the two people that picked on me, the bullies, were 15 years old, 14 and 15 years old, that lived across the parking lot of me. I mean, it's not a big parking lot, but just right across from me. And they picked on me all the freaking time. And I was about 7, 8 years old, something around there. Um, I remember going to the swimming pool. There was a public swimming pool. It cost $2 to get in. I remember that because I remember asking my mother for $2, and she yelled at me because she was trying to sleep, and she said, "Fine, go get the $2 off the refrige." So I'd go take it and I'd go swimming, and man, I remember this lifeguard chick, redheaded girl. Gosh, she was hot. I mean, she was probably 16 years old. I don't know, but I was 8 years old. I never went through that phase of girls had cooties. No, I always liked girls. Um, but I remember trying to swim and everything, and my them boys came over, and while I was there, and they held me underwater, and I thought I was drowning. I mean, they held me under for a long time. Um, but lifeguards actually ended up saving me and get me out of the water and everything. But it actually reminds me of another story from when my still living with my stepfather, which is probably the reason why I have a fear of water. I was scared to go to the swimming pool, but I did it anyway. Like I said, I always faced my fears, but when I was younger, about 4.5 years old, the only reason I say that age is because I believe my brother was born, and he's 4.5 years younger than me. Um, but we were at the lake, and I remember walking with my sister in the water, and then we hit a drop off, and I didn't know how to swim, and she didn't know how to swim, and she starts screaming and yelling and pushes me further under the water. And my stepdad ended up, pulling us out and everything, but I remember just feeling like it's in this, like we were in a hole, and I was like grabbing the side of the beach or whatever it was, the ground, while we were underwater, and trying to pull my way up there and stuff, but I couldn't do it because I didn't know anything about swimming, and my sister was pushing me under. But it was my uncle, or my stepdad, my mother used to have a really bad habit of, or I shouldn't say she did, he did. Well, she might have done it too. I can't remember, but would actually pit me and my sister to fight each other. And I didn't want to fight her. I hated the idea of fighting a girl, you know, not because I didn't want to get my butt kicked by a girl or something. It was just, I felt like it was wrong, but I'd been watching, my mother get into fights and getting hit by men my whole life. Yeah, well, my whole young child life. But I remember it being a common thing, you know, um, of watching violence, But again, I was not a very, I don't know, I wasn't very smart. Um, I didn't do a lot of thinking about anything. Um, I just felt everything. Everything was feeling. I cried all the time, all the time. I remember going into kindergarten in Panama because until I moved in with my aunt and uncle years later, I had never been to a school longer than 1 year consecutive. I might have gone back, like McCurtain, I've been back a few times. I'd go back and forth, but nothing was ever consecutive. Um, I was always moving. We were just always moving. Uh, and I remember going to kindergarten and going inside the um, the lunchroom, and me seeing all these people there, and I just started crying. I was scared. I mean, I was alone. You would have think that I would have been used to that by then. I mean, I was always alone, even when I was with people. But Fast forward back to when we're in Texas. I remember them kids, that 14, 15-year-old kids. One day they were chasing me again. Like I said, they fought me at the pool. I mean, they were always bullying me. But one day they were chasing me around the building, and it was around right next to their building. Here's ours. They were over here, and they were chasing me. And one, my mind says they were brothers. I don't know. Um, they might have just been friends, but one was running this way, and the other was running this way, and I was right here. And I just got tired of running. Because like I said, I was bullied. It was bad. It was bad enough that I had to see my mother getting beat up all the time, but now I'm getting beat up. Um, Not only by her boyfriends and stuff, but by by random kids. And at this point, I'd never stood up for myself. I stood up for my mother, but never for myself. I stood up for other people before. I remember that. But they're running, and one comes around the corner, starts running towards me, and I'm just standing there while he's running towards me. I'm not moving. I'm just standing, and I wait. And as soon as he gets right up to me where he's about to hit me, I do the only thing I knew how to do. I kicked him right in the nuts, and he fell to the ground. And he's sitting there starting to bawl loud. Well, at that time, his friend or brother, I mean, we'll call him brother, comes around and sees him on the ground crying. And there's just me standing over him. And then he just takes off. And that probably taught me one of the biggest lessons that had helped me since then. I mean, even now, as that even if you think you're going to get your ass whooped physically, mentally, it doesn't matter what it is. You still stand up for yourself. You still do what you've got to do. You're going to get whooped anyway. But whenever you stand up for yourself, you can be surprised sometimes that you're a lot tougher than them. And so they never bullied me anymore. They left me alone after that. But in fact, one of their I was friends with one of their little brothers. Remember, he had a Sega Genesis. It just came out just right after the Nintendo. Yeah, but anyway, one day my mother comes home from work. Um, well, let me back up before I say that. My step grandmother and her husband both owned a cleaning business, and they cleaned apartments also. Um, but they would actually hire me to help them clean the apartments. I didn't get paid much. I thought it was a lot then. It was $20 a day, um, or $20 apart in apartment. Sorry, uh, which was a lot of money for a kid, especially in the '80s. And I worked hard. And I'd sit and clean apartments. So when I tell people I got my first job at 7, I really did. And they expected me to do the job right. It wasn't where I got to play around and pretend like I'm helping. I mean, they're pretty strict about that. My mother was pretty strict about me working. Um, but one day my mother comes home and she tells me and my sister that she has to go help a friend that is sick. And she was going to be gone for a few days. And we were going to stay with our neighbors. And so I remember going to our neighbor's house, and I remember it being a very dirty. I say house. It was in the same apartment complex. It was an apartment building, or an apartment, and I remember it stinking. I can smell it today. And the dirt. I mean, I remember the dirt floor being so dirty it looked like a dirt floor. Uh, but after a couple of days, my step grandmother came and picked me up, picked me, my sister, and my brother up. and took us over to her house. And I found out that my mother was not coming back, that she actually abandoned us. And she didn't go to help a sick friend. She went back to Ronnie Lovell and left us there because he didn't want us to be there. He didn't want, us to be a part of their life. And so at that point, my step grandmother and step grandfather didn't want me and my sister, but they kept my baby brother because, he was theirs. Uh, and so they called my granny and grandpa that uh, lived in Arkansas and in Oklahoma. They had the farm in Oklahoma, but they were living in Arkansas in Heber Springs, um, just because it was his job. He was a blaster. He did dynamite for highways, and we get there in Heber Springs, and of course it was a new experience again. But this time there was no drinking, no. I mean, except, well, my grandpa, he was an alcoholic, and I didn't know that though. He was a functional alcoholic. I remember because we'd travel on the weekend. We'd go from Heber Springs and drive to the farm, and I always rode with him because they'd take two different vehicles, uh, and he would stop on the side of the road. He always drank Diet Coke, and he'd pour half his Diet Coke out and pour McCormick vodka in it. I didn't think anything about it at that time. But he was always drinking vodka and Coke, Diet Coke. Um, but I don't remember him ever acting drunk or anything like my mother. But he always smelled like vodka. I could always smell it. Um, in fact, I had a dream of him the other night. For the first time, I've never dreamt of him, and he was in it, and I could smell the vodka. It was pretty surreal. It kind of freaked me out when I woke up. But anyway, so we lived in Heber Springs, and it was at that time that my uncle Chris actually moved in with us. And I mean, he had to have been in his early 20s because he was the baby out of my aunt and uncles, or my uncles and my mother. Uh, but I remember that they get a call to assist the highway, or not the highway, assist the police department because they were heavy equipment operators. Apparently, there's a swinging bridge that was in Heber Springs. They had all these kids on it on this church retreat, and they took the swinging part literally, and they swung, and all the kids, everybody fell into the river, and a good percentage of them drowned and died, and they were rescuing the bodies out of the river. And I can remember that, and I remember them dying and stuff, but I don't know, it just didn't affect me. I got to back up a little bit. There is a story when we were still in Texas. I know you're going to hate me because I keep going back and forth. But that's what my brain works. I'm trying to dig all these memories out, and they're not wanting to come out because I haven't thought about them since, well, the 80s and the 90s. I remember the first time I realized death was real. Even though I'd seen death, even though I'd seen abuse, it never hit me. I was sitting there in the apartment building, and I was watching Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And that part where that cult leader was inside that temple, and he pulled that heart out of that guy while it was still beating. And it suddenly occurred to me that one day I'm going to die. And it could be just nothing, blackness. And I was scared. It was the first time I remember ever being scared. But I was terrified. Anyway, back to Heber Springs. So I got my first girlfriend in Heber Springs. I mean, there was an actual official girlfriend. I was in fourth grade. Her name was Megan Ann Bray. Uh, I remember she was this cute little blonde. I couldn't believe that she would want to be my girlfriend. Fourth grader. I remember she wrote this letter to me, the check yes or no letter, like the George Strait song. But again, I'm half retarded. I didn't check yes or no. I wrote in, I guess, real romantic. But uh, but she's my girlfriend. I remember this kid was bullying her or picking on her or something, and I just attacked him and just started whooping up on him. I was a very violent kid. Um, I mean, I didn't want to hurt people. I still don't want to hurt people. Um, but that's how I responded. And so after, that year, my grandpa, I guess he gets transferred to another town, Fayetteville, Arkansas. So we moved to Fayetteville, and I started school at Asbel Elementary, where I remember very clearly uh, saying the wrong words. There was this black teacher. She wasn't my teacher, but she was having kids um, cleaning up something out in the hall, some kind of project. And me just trying to joke around. I did not understand inappropriate or take anything because I didn't know anything about history or anything. And I said, well, I was like, well, I see it's about time you got some slaves. Apparently, she's really touchy about that subject. And I remember getting yelled at, and it was humiliating. And I just started crying and went to the bathroom stall crying. I mean, because I was always saying things wrong anyway. I didn't mean anything by it, but apparently, her being black and that kind of stuff, she was one of them that gets really touchy about that. I mean, I was a little boy. I didn't know anything. But I remember that I was going to this counselor, and I can't remember if this was in Heber Springs or Asbel. But this is the only time I'd ever had counseling in my entire childhood. But I went to this group counseling with other kids, and I remember them have this blow up punch bag thing, and they'd have me punch it and stuff. But we were in this. Everybody decided to confront one kid, and this was orchestrated by the counselor because the kid stank. He obviously didn't shower at all, didn't bathe. Um, and so they all confronted him about it. And I felt so horrified by the whole aspect of that. Like, how could you, I mean, and the next day, I decided I'm not going to counseling anymore because I'm not going to be a part of that. It was wrong then. And here I am, in, uh, heck, I don't know, fifth grade, fourth or fifth grade. And even at that age, I wasn't going to partake in that. And then one of the kids that was in counseling, he came up to me. He said, "You're supposed to be in counseling right now." And he was looking for me because he was in the counseling, and the counselor sent them to look for me. He said, "We were all wanting to talk to you." And I could only think about the day before them confronting him about stinking. I just didn't want to be confronted by something. So it was the only time I can remember ever running from something. Um, but I never had a good experiences with counselors because counselors again didn't care. But I mean, I've got more stories about that in high school. But anyway, um, my mother ends up getting a hold of my granny and grandpa, I guess, and was talking to them, and um, So she would call us every once in a while, and she was always saying she was going to send us a Christmas card, Christmas card and presents, or birthday card and presents. But we never got anything. I mean, she always said, "Oh, it's in the mail," but it wasn't. And I was always expecting it. And I still had faith in that my mother, I wanted to live back with my mother and stuff, but when we were in Fayetteville, we actually ended up moving to another house that was more into the country. I remember Uncle Chris taking me to the movies, taking us to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles uh, with his new girlfriend, who he married later on. But my grandpa would have this friend named Kenneth. I can't remember anything else, but they were really, really sweet couple. Um, and they would buy us, presents. I remember one Christmas they bought us sleeping bags and stuff, but they were really good people. But I actually got my first best friend while in Fayetteville. Um, his name was Skymo Seacheck. And I'd stay the night at his house. It was my first sleepover at a friend's house. And I remember he had the big remote control cars that his dad would buy him. He got nice toys and presents. I mean, they were pretty more financial well-to-do than I was used to. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't wealthy, but at that time in my eyes, he was, because I'd never seen stuff like that where that you got toys like that. At this point, the only time I gathered up toys, every time I gathered up toys, I'd lose them all by the end of the year because we'd move and I didn't get to keep my toys. So I never had anything. But he was the first friend I remember ever having. But my mother ended up calling and saying, and we were sent back with her, and she had left Ronnie again. And we move in with her at a neighboring town in Oklahoma that, we were in McCurtain. That's where we were from. But Bekoshi, this other little bitty town, no stoplights or anything like that. I don't even know if there's stop signs. But I think we were only there for a day or two. And my sister had called DHS. I guess there wasn't any food in the house or anything. And so we didn't stay there for very long. And I don't remember if we went straight with my aunt and uncle, but my Uncle Larry and my Aunt Shelley ended up taking us. And I don't actually have any memories of them prior to me living with them. But I have memories of my Uncle Leonard. I have memories of my Uncle Chris. But I don't have any memories of Larry and Shelley. Shelley had already had a son and daughter that had already graduated high school at that time. In fact, they just graduated not too long. My Uncle Larry had never had his own kids. They were about 10 or 11 years apart, Shelley being the eldest. But they take us in, and I think that's probably a good place to stop because it's been almost an hour. But again, I apologize about jumping around. You're going to get a lot more of it. But until next time, thank you.